Yo, everybody, welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the writer of comics like Knights of X, Catwoman, and the just-launched Phenomenocity on Substack. It's Tini Howard. Thanks for coming on, Tini.
Thanks for having me, David. Hey, everyone. Glad to be here for the first time. I've listened to the podcast on several occasions, but it's my first time here. Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to ask, it's week one for Phenomenocity on your Substack, the Scorpio Room. How's launch week going? Is it a little weird launching something like this versus like Knights of X was just a few weeks ago? Does it feel different?
Totally. It feels totally different. So Phenomenocity is my first time doing a creator-owned project in years. I did a book called The Skeptics with the publisher Black Mask when I was first in comics, and I guess 14 when I did that. And then I did a book called Assassinistas and a book called Euthanauts at IDW when they had their Black Crown imprint with Shelley Bond, the great Shelley Bond. So since then, I hadn't done any creator-owned work. I've had a lot of really incredible mentors in my career, and so getting to work with Shelley and getting to put out 2 creator-owned books was like really huge, but I absolutely had a lot of her guidance. I mean, this is, if you're not familiar with Shelley, this is, one of the women who made Vertigo Comics what it is, and one of the people who really, stood Vertigo up and edited and shepherded and sought out and curated some of the greatest comics of our time. And one of the things I think that made Vertigo so great was that they had a lot of women. They had women like Karen Berger and Shelley Bond and women in power as tastemakers who were gravitating to things that not everyone was responding to in the industry. And that's, I think, why it changed comics. Anyway, back to me. So I did those books through her, and I had a lot of her guidance because I was just like, oh my God, why would I not, want so much of your shepherding on this? And I learned so much. And then after that, I'd been working at Marvel, and then I've been working on the X-Men line for such a long time. And that has had, for the first year or two of that, it was, so much energy poured into it that it really felt like the amount of energy I would pour into a creator-owned book. I mean, we did so much in building Krakoa, working with John Hickman and Jerry Dugan and Ben Percy, and, the first round of writers in the X Room was a whole huge amount of just architecture and structure and planning and building, and it's kind of weird because when you write, it's like you got to make plans for really far down. It's kind of like life. You got to make plans for 5 years from now, even if they don't happen.
Yeah.
And it's just because you need to have a way to wake up and behave today, right? You need goals so that they define, if you wake up today, what can I do today to get farther to where I want to be in 5 years? Otherwise I just flop around. It's kind of like that in comics, right? You need to have somewhere for Jean Grey to be going in 5 years so that defines what you do with Jean Grey every day when she wakes up and goes and, puts her little green dress on and joins the X-Men. The Jean people are not going to like the green dress reference. They're not going to appreciate my joke.
No, they're not.
I'm ducking tomatoes spiritually.
People really do not like that dress.
It's so funny to me. I'm y'all, she has a lot of outfits. Yeah, it was a huge amount of energy. And so I really didn't feel like I had the ability to work on a creator-owned project while I was working in the X office because it was just so much of my energy. I was pouring so much into that. And so I'm still working in the X office. I don't mean that to sound like past tense. It's just that I've done a huge amount of building and a huge amount of setup over the past few years, and now things are kind of running. I've done a lot of that building work, and now I'm just kind of able to, after 3 years of writing, Captain Britain stories, I'm able to pretty regularly just thresh the wheat that I've grown and have story that way. So, and then Catwoman, same with that. It's that's just a character I've been so familiar with for so long that writing her has just come really naturally to me. And there's so much amazing that already exists in Gotham. Writing a story in Gotham is it's so rich. There's so much history. There's so much good stuff. It's just dip your hand into Gotham and you come up with something good.
Mm-hmm.
That a lot of what I do there is taking existing things and setting them up rather than feeling like I'm doing a lot of generative energy. Okay, so all this to get to me deciding I wanted to do a creator-owned book again. I really liked the idea of doing something where, I don't know, it appealed to me to do it online because I liked the idea of being able to raise money to pay the artist from people that are just active fans, and then that's how we make the book, and then we can make a print artifact of it. We can publish it for people that aren't digital readers or people that just want a physical copy or just to be in bookstores, because there's still something really there to be said about finding a book on the shelf at a library or a bookstore. That's how a lot of people read. So, we can do that. It felt really good to me because it was the it would be the first time in my career that I was doing a creator-owned thing and I had no tethers, like no one telling me what to do,
Mm-hmm.
no boundaries. I could have done anything with this.
Well, really quick, I do think the interesting thing about talking to the creators who work on Substack, it's you're repositioned as like the publisher effectively. And I think that's an interesting thing. You're like, you can make your Scorpio room line bigger. You can make it, you can do whatever you want with it, and it becomes your own land. And I do think that's one of the interesting things is, I guess that's a huge difference between a normal launch week and this launch week is like, you decide when the launch week is happening. You decide everything, and the time was right.
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of what feels so unbelievable about it is that it feels like, someone who heads up a lot of these Substack initiatives is Nick Spencer. And he's someone who, like, I've talked to him a lot about what we're doing because, even though our comic is reader funded, he's still a great resource at being able to, like, just reach out for assistance and promotion and help and just, guidance. It's always good to have someone who's willing to walk you through things and that. And I'm lucky enough to be, friends and coworkers with some of the people that have really been taking off on Substack, and some of those people have been really cool about, giving me advice and letting me know what's worked for them and what hasn't for us to go forward. So I don't know. I decided I wanted to do a creator-owned book again, and after working at the big two is so much of an approvals process that if I'm being honest, I was just like, I don't want to go through an approvals process to make my own book right now. Like, I really don't.
Sure.
So I was like, I just want to make it. And I don't want to ask anyone's permission. I just want to be able to start making a story that I know is there. I don't want to have to wrap it up into a perfect marketing thing. I just want to go. So I knew that to do that, I needed to get money. I needed to have a bake sale. I needed to raise money for the pages somehow, because even when you have what is, largely considered to be a successful comics career, it isn't always easy to get money to make the books you want to make.
Yeah.
So, and the person I knew I wanted to make it with was Phil Seavey. Phil and I have been really good friends for a long time. We both came up at Top Cow through the talent hunt contest. Our first thing we worked on together was the book Poseidon 9, and I just knew from that, it was like a little one shot in the Cyberforce Aphrodite 9 universe, and I just knew from that moment I was always going to work with Phil again. He just like blew my mind. I love his art, and he's a wonderful person. And that's, I think, a big thing about doing a creator-owned book is like, it's like a little bit like a marriage. Like, it's a little bit like having kids with someone, where it's like, even if you break up, you're always going to have this kid together. Like, you are always going to share this IP.
Yeah.
And if someone wants to come buy the IP, that means you have to talk to the person that you might, after working with them, not get along with anymore, which has never really happened to me, but I know it does happen in comics. And so it was really important to me to have someone like Phil, who I really, really trust as a friend, and and not just as a friend, a creator, like as an artist, as a soul. Like, I trust him. We come from similar places. We aren't afraid to be real with each other. We hold each other up when we need to. We're both super hardworking. We approach this from the same direction. And honestly, I have to say, like, I don't know if anyone else other than Phil would have helped me get it off the ground like it had to. I mean, we both just had crazy things going on, and we set ourselves a promo schedule and a work schedule. The night before it launched, we were up super late. We were up super early the morning that it launched. I mean, we lost sleep, but we birthed a baby.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting because you're saying, this is reader funded. So I think one difference between, like, one important part about that trust is you're both taking on, there's an idea of risk there. You're both taking on that risk. And so you have to know that you're in there together. Like, this is a true partnership, because otherwise, I mean, that's going to be tough to do, right? I imagine that was like an important consideration, is like, are you both ready for this? And it's clear that you are.
Yeah, I mean, it was the readiness thing is such a huge thing, and especially in creator-owned comics, right? Because it can feel kind of, I mean, in comics in general, sometimes releasing a book can feel like, jumping into a jump rope. It's like, when do I go? When's the right time? And you either nail it and you jump rope for 50 issues, or you get smacked in the eye and you're canceled at 4. Like,
yeah.
Or you run out of money and you don't make any more issues or whatever. And like that, I think, was the thing for me, was I was really, really scared because Phil drew this amazing first chapter on hope, and I was like, what if I've like failed him here, my friend who makes this beautiful art, and I just didn't do my part, and what if I just have to like pay him out of my pocket and be like, I'm sorry, friend, like, and
we tried.
Yeah, and I'm like really, really grateful to report that like does not seem to be the case. Like, we're already, we're very excited, and we're already, working on chapter 2.
I think that one thing that's really interesting is, like, I just had James Tynan on the podcast, and we were talking about how he left for Substack kind of at the right moment. Like he left when, he was at kind of peak of his power as a Batman and everything. And I do think that that's like an important part of the thing for you too, is like you're coming off this big Marvel launch, and I hate to make it sound like Knights of X is promotional material for this, but you couldn't have asked for better timing than that coming off of a big launch.
Yeah, I mean, it was really, really great that like before we launched, I kind of woke my Substack back up. I had a couple months at the beginning of the year where I just stopped being forward facing at all for a few months. Like I wasn't on Instagram, I wasn't on anything. And then when we started working on this again, and maybe I needed that time to figure out that what I really wanted to do was a creator-owned project and to move forward with it and to work with it. So I got really lucky that, as we were planning that, when I could come back to Substack, I could start making these weekly posts. And there was a lot of hunger for what I was saying because I'd been gone for a couple months and there'd been this book break. And then it was like this book came back. Everyone wants to hear me talk about it. And I'm like, well, okay, come for that and hopefully stay, for dessert. And it seems like I was surprised really at how many people have showed up for dessert.
Yeah.
Frankly, like I thought, that we would get like a fraction of people who were interested in what else I had to say, but like a lot of people, I mean, and one thing I'm really glad about now that I look at the numbers we've had and I see, where we've been successful so far. And I'm so glad that we made the scary decision to make the comic itself available for free. And if you remember, that like the free pages are going to go up first for paid members and then free subscribers will get access 2 weeks later. But despite the delay, it does mean that the comic will always be available free, at least until we have a publisher or something who tells us we can't, be available online free for people to read. And it's just because that's, one of the things that Nick and the other folks at Substack are really about is just getting more people to read comics.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also I've heard that like for a lot of people, the comics are less of a hook. It's more like, you two doing like a 90-minute live stream, or like your write-up you had about George Perez, which I just want to say it was probably my single favorite one. Like that was an absolutely incredible story.
You.
So if you haven't read it, you should go read Tini's story on the Scorpio Room about a cosplay contest that George Perez judged, because it is fantastic. But I do think that that's a really powerful tool because it's, Phenomenocity is like kind of the gateway to it. Like it's kind of like the thing that everyone is kind of gathered around, and then it forms the community there. And you were saying you kind of dialed back your social media there for a bit. I actually think that that's really smart. I mean, like, not that you were doing it necessarily strategically, but it's like sometimes, like, I've always thought that part of the reason why Saga launched as big as it did was because Brian K. Vaughan was kind of gone for like 3 years from comics.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's people get this like pent up desire, like, where's Tini? I want to read Tini stuff. And then you give them this, and next thing you know, there's a lot more interest there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a Scorpio, so I won't say that my emotional reservation is entirely unstrategic.
Sure.
Like, but I mean, strategic means a lot of things, right? Like, this career can be very draining. I don't have the energy to be present. And there are a lot of people who are successful because they're super forward facing, because they're really good at answering every comment that people give them or being that person online. I found really early on that just drains me in a way that I don't feel good about. And the kind of interactions that really rejuvenate me are ones that feel maybe a little quieter, a little weirder, but are more, high value, I guess.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I don't mean that I mean that in a emotional way or whatever. So like, I went to a shop to sign for Free Comic Book Day and like spent, a while talking to this cool kid named Teddy in a Morbius shirt who was telling me all about like the comics they love. And like that to me is, and just asking me about making comics and how to do, and like that to me is, I'm like, that is a rejuvenating interaction.
Mm-hmm.
People that mean well, ask, like, getting 30 tweets a day asking if this plot point in my latest issue is going to be resolved or not. Those people don't mean any harm, and I don't wish them ill, but it's just a matter of fact that getting that 30 times a day becomes draining and makes it so that social media is really unusable.
Yeah.
Which is fine, honestly. As a writer, I don't know how good it is for me to have an outlet where I can just spew 200 characters for applause whenever I want anyway. I feel like that's maybe not good for not good for a creative brain anyway.
Sure.
In my opinion. But yeah, no, I definitely, it's not unstrategic. I mean, I definitely do believe in going backstage before you come out. I'm definitely someone who, like, I understand that people value access to me, but I can be kind of a private person. And so I have to like limit how accessible I am, because I don't want to say open, because I'm very open with people when I talk to them, but accessibility is something I do have to limit. And I really am enjoying the community we've built around Phenomenocity and the community of fans I have, because we've already had a really exciting community. And I was worried because I didn't have comments on for a long time.
Oh.
And so I didn't have that interaction. I was just writing into the void, and I would hear things like, "Oh, I liked that post," and be like, "Okay, people are reading," but I deliberately didn't want feedback. I just wanted a place to say my piece.
Mm-hmm.
And then now that I've like brought that back, I've just been really happy about the community that's developed. And I know that there was a time where things like the Bendis boards and stuff were really valuable for people who wanted to make comics. And I think now you're seeing some of these like comic substacks also become spaces where fans are talking to each other in Chip's comments or Hickman's comments or Jason Aaron's comments or whatever, talking about how they want to make books and how they can do that. And I think those spaces are vital.
I hadn't thought of it, but it is kind of like the Bendis boards back in the day, because it was like, those were very creator centric and a lot of people kind of met each other there. But okay, I want to do a quick spiel about Phenomenocity. It's your new free Substack comic. Well, actually, an important wrinkle. You mentioned this earlier. I think important distinction. I love that you have made it so you get the pages early if you pay for it. It reminds me of like the Fast Pass on Webtoon, where it's like it kind of gets you like that, I don't know, exclusiveness that people love to get. Like, that's a nice little hook.
I mean, the real talk about any marketing you're ever going to see on Phenomenocity is I do what works on me.
Yeah.
So, like, what works on me on the Substacks and the newsletters I read is when someone starts talking about something and then they're like, oh, I'll talk more about this in a video I'll post for paid people. Or I'll read a free chapter and I'm like, I got to know what happens next.
Oh my God.
I can pay and do that. I'll do that now. Yeah. So I just do what works on me.
I upgraded my 3 Worlds, 3 Moons one because I found out that like a certain level would get a more likely chance of getting sketches from Mike Del Mundo and Mike Huddleston at Emerald City. And I was like, oh shit, they got me. They got me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Got a Del Mundo sketch. Oof.
Oh, I know. But so anyways, it's your book with Phillips Evie, and it's a quick spiel. It's a near future noir comic about an atmospheric phenomenon, the city beneath it, and a woman who never expected to live this long. I have to say, for an 11-page comic, that barely even scratches the surface because it has like a ton of mystery to it. I really liked it. I do want to bring up one specific thing that ties into all this, which is social media plays a big part in Phenomenocity. It's one of my favorite parts of the initial story we've gotten from it. In that world, social media is no longer a thing, as it was nipped in the bud before it became the disaster it is today quite often. And the main character, Amelia, she's like I don't know, Indiana Jones of the internet, a digital archivist who recovers mementos from the world, like photos, videos, posts, or whatever. I think that idea is super fascinating. Like, where did that idea come from? Is it just sort of born from your own thoughts about social media?
A lot of it is. A lot of it is born also of talking to Phil. Like, a lot of these were concepts that we came at and we refined, and they were things that were like, okay, well, if we do it this way, it works better for this part of the story and it ties in later and things like that. But a lot of it is just due to my own like thoughts about it, and also my own like growing up on it. Like, I'm very much in the age group where I had the analog childhood and the digital adulthood. Like, I was a kind of like some of those first like IRC live journal kids, like sharing fan fiction and stuff. I was like pretty online by like 1997, like I really, really grew up and watched the internet go from this place where it was like everyone was a vigilante with like a fake name and a wild past, and things were just like, ARGs and legends and insanity, to now a world where like not only do those things not exist anymore, but now social media has YouTube channels that talk about how weird that stuff was. So like just watching the meat of my teenage years completely fade and then become this bizarre mystery that it's like, what was that like? To me was really interesting. And so Amelia also, as we'll learn more in the story, she's also someone that has a past in fandom like I did.
Yeah.
And that's really where her a lot of her adeptness comes from. Like, she kind of learned to be good at this stuff because of things like, for example, if you've ever been an online role player, which I imagine some people listening have been, you probably have that feeling that between you and one of your role playing partners, you wrote a great novel. Like, if you guys could just pull up the 150,000 words that you wrote to each other, it would and edit it, it might be a great novel. And look, the truth is, it wouldn't be, but Amelia would take your money to say, okay, and go find that and give it to you. So yeah, I mean, Amelia is valuable because it was also interesting, I think, and neat to make her someone who wasn't like a cop or like an official. She's just kind of like a PI. She's like somewhere between like a professional organizer and a private investigator.
Yeah. I feel like, honestly, that role would 100% exist in that world. I think that's one of the things that immediately struck me about it is like, as soon as I read that, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. That would be a thing that exists.
Yeah, and we had fun also with the what I call like the future past of it, right? So one of my favorite technological things is best summed up by the Star Wars trilogy. The Star Wars trilogy, I know they're technically not sci-fi. That's for another discussion. But the Star Wars trilogy to me, because they were made, the original films were made in the late 70s and early 80s, their version of future tech is inspired by that, which is why even now when you have a movie like Rogue One that was made in the, 2010s, the core plot thing is we have to take this tape and take it to a radio tower and turn on a satellite to get like a file off the planet. Like,
Yeah.
which seems crazy in a sci-fi thing, but I actually love that. And I
Yeah.
kind of love the idea that like in a world where social media is not important, wireless technology becomes less important. So like you see Amelia using tools that are basically like Google Glass that plug into like a zip drive that plugs into a laptop. It's cool, one, I think, because I like the future past, like weird feeling of it. It reminds me of the kind of jury rig computer PC stuff people used to do in my youth. My dad was a computer guy, and he and I used to just rip PCs apart on the ground and make stuff out of them. And also it gives the world more just like fun and whimsy and difference, and it adds more story stuff, right? It's a different story if your character is running around with all of their information and their wireless glasses, or if they have to sit down and dig into their files.
Right.
Gives the story a different speed. And I think the speed of wires works more for a war type pacing.
And now, a quick word from one of off-panel sponsors. Macroverse is a next-generation digital comics platform, and one with an astonishing number of comics, with currently over 50 series from over 100 creators on their app, with a 5-star rating both on Apple and Google's app stores. Download the app and binge all their titles, including the Eisner-nominated Remind from Jason Brubaker, Lisa K. Weber's Hex 11, which has been described as Harry Potter meets Blade Runner, or the new queer supernatural adventure series Husk that launches on November 1st. It's just $4.99 a month to subscribe to Macroverse, with proceeds directly supporting the creators on the platform. Keep an eye on the future of Macroverse 2, as 2022 is going to bring an epic upgrade that offers a new level of digital collectability and more, with early adopters able to sign up for more information at macroverse.com. And now, back to the show. Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of The Private Eye, Brian K. Vaughan and Marcos Martin, where it was like, they had the cloud burst and everyone there's like still like manifestations of that in the real world, but it's like you have your like own unique flavors. I have to admit, at first I was like, does she have really bad eyesight? And I was like, oh, these glasses are like a special tool. All right, yeah. This is cool.
That was a weird little effect that Phil and I like went back and forth, that I felt like I could see really, like I wish if I could ever get to some sort of crazy level where I could like make and send out like 3D glasses, like the idea that there's like decoder glasses.
Oh man.
It's just another level of like, if you put the file in, you can't just see it on the computer. If you put the file in and you plug the glasses in and you run the program and you put them on, then it's decoded. I just think gadgets are fun, man.
Yeah, they totally are. I mean, I love that. I mean, I thought that was a really cool thing. I do want to say that elements like that, and then also, I think one of the interesting things about you doing this now, so you're doing it launched in May. Most of the original wave of Substack books launched in August, and then there was like another one I think in October, and then there was another wave in like January. So one of the cool things is like I feel like you kind of have some of the learnings that everybody else had about what works and what doesn't.
Totally.
You've almost had like all these guinea pigs running around doing the thing for you. But yeah, I actually think that what you and Phil have done with the whole what is it called? The founder level, they get real estate, in which they work with you and Phil to create new elements of the city itself, which, to quote, unlocking new stories and adding to the geography of Phenomenocity, as you say in the post. That is probably the best reward I've heard for any of these Substacks. Like, does does the potential to collaborate with readers appeal to you and Phil, and like to do it in such a way like that?
In that way, it really does. Like I said, I only ever offer things that would work on me. This is Phil and I's place to have fun and do what we like. We don't have any gods or masters here, so you're never going to see us do anything on here that we don't like love to do and want to do.
Yeah.
So like this was my way of doing something that would work on me. It reminded me of, again, when I worked with Shelley Bond. She had a part of the Black Crown Quarterly that would be, I wrote a thing that was like a tour of a town, and like it was a tour of all these shops that like the artists and writers so there was like basically like a fake street, like a high street, like a fake, St. Mark's or whatever, the cool street the Castro, the cool street everyone goes to. And her version of that, all the different shops on the street were shops that like people had suggested. So like I think I suggested a place called like Coven Coffee, and it was like a witch themed coffee shop that was like something like that, or like people had like music. I think like the Allreds had like a music store. Like it was I loved that. And I was like, that's really cool for an imprint. What about like I don't know. I've always as a reader and as a fan, I've loved when I go to like panels and stuff, and they're like, okay, we're gonna draw a page together, or we're gonna, like it's just there's nothing better than learning by doing. I'm also a role player. I like role playing. I like D&D. I like vampire. I like that stuff. So it's exciting for me to sit down and with our handful of founders and be like, where do we want to go? What do we want to do? What does the city need? What's the first place we want to open? And if everyone's like a restaurant, then it's like, okay, let's start there. Like we go as to get together and we move as a class, and then when that place is built, Phil and I will tell a story about it that everyone gets to read, and the founders know that they had a part in making that. And it's just, to me, it's just something I would want to do, if I were a reader and I got to build part of the city. And it's fun and it's interesting too, because it isn't letting fans direct the direction of the story, which I frankly think really breaks the magic of a story. Like, I think it would be different to allow people to create characters or to allow people to, choose your own adventure. I think that would be really unfun for me.
Right.
But real estate works because there's so many places in the city, but one can be really meaningful. And also it is a subtle way of directing the story. If all of the readers want to go see our main character go to,
ramen shop.
Yeah, a ramen shop, then they're all like, okay, let's make a ramen shop, or, Party City, or,
I love Party City. I hope there's some Party City in the future.
Yeah, she wants to go get froyo, like whatever, or anything, a lab, a church, whatever. Like people can say, this is the building, this is the part of it. Basically, it's a way of communicating with our most dedicated fans, and they're saying this is the part of the city we want to see, and then we just get to have a creative experiment together.
Yeah,
where we think about what that might look like and what we might name that, and it's meant to be fun and engaging. It's not meant to be it's not going to be like one fan's restaurant competing against another or anything like that. It's just meant to be a cool creative vibe where we figure out what this place is and what lives there and who we might meet there.
If it was you put yourself into the story, that could fundamentally change it, because that's like a person. Like, you have to do something with the person. Also, it might upset them if you like kill them off or something like that.
It sounds like a legal mess.
Yeah, that doesn't sound good. But with the idea, it actually reminds me of like improv comedy, where like improv comedy, it's like somebody just throws out a word. It's like sandwich, and then all of a sudden they're doing a routine around sandwich. At that point, you and Phil get to do whatever you want. You can fit it within the story. Like with role playing games, it's like sometimes you go on an aside.
A lot of improv.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you maybe you go off on what seems like an aside, but maybe it becomes more than that because you didn't think of it before then. That, I don't know. I think that is such a cool wrinkle you two have added.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a lot of experience in like what I'll say like is like improv storytelling. Both
Sure.
I've done like improv theater and I've done a lot of role playing and whatever, and like I love it. Like one of my favorite things is when I'm just sitting around with a friend and we just like get into like a stupid conversation as two people that aren't real and just make each other laugh. Like to me, that kind of creativity that's just like spontaneous and born from like group thinking. I love like creative retreats. So it's kind of our way of bringing those vibes that I like so much to share with people that are just being so incredibly generous.
Sure.
So the least I can do is be generous back.
I have to rewind to one thing you said. You brought up Coven Coffee. I am really interested. Are you a big, like, do you love magic? Is like that just a thing that it just seems like it's something that surrounds you?
Yeah. Okay. So I talk about this a lot. I'm actually like a pretty skeptical person. Like I'm not very like woo woo when it comes to like beliefs and things, but I am really fascinated by it. And I always have been. Like I'm one of those people where I'm really, really skeptical because I desperately want to believe in something weird and real, but like I have found almost nothing to be entirely inexplicable. I love people like James Randi. My book, the first book, The Skeptics, was almost entirely based on, it was like a love letter to his works and an experiment that he did. But it's funny because, a lot of skeptics are these like very like, serious scientific types. And I'm like, not. I'm like a weirdo artist who just loves weird things. And I want something so weird. I desperately want to find something so weird I can't explain it, that no one can explain it, And there are a couple things like that, and they fascinate me. But overall, yeah, I think one thing that really, really fascinates me is that we have always, as people, come up with like a certain weird kind of explanation for things that don't have an explanation, right? And like there's like an Alan Moore TED talk where he kind of talks about how like magic was kind of a catch-all for early cultures, and then as time went on, like magic used to be the magician used to be the person that healed your cold, but then over time we figured out what a doctor was, and so that role got broken off from magician, and that became the doctor role. Now doctors do that, and magicians bless you, but they don't actually change anything, and like so the magician gets downgraded. I find that stuff really, really fascinating. I find like randomness to be very fascinating. I find things like tarot cards to be really incredible narrative storytelling tools. I've talked a lot about how I think that like if you draw 3 tarot cards next to each other and then figure out what those 3 cards are saying to you, that's sequential storytelling.
Yeah.
And that's and so I think like using tarot as just like a random tool, like a randomization tool while I write comics. So yeah, I would say I'm fascinated by magic and witchcraft and all that. I am a wild-hearted practitioner of every weird thing I can find, but I definitely shy away from a lot of like new age woo-woo stuff because I'm really sensitive to like manipulation and cults and that kind of thing, which is also something I find fascinating. Why does that keep happening in human history?
Well, I mean, it is interesting when you think about that through the prism of Phenomenocity, where it's like Phenomenon City is fundamentally built on this phenomenon that no one understands, that everyone wants to understand, and it forms into these different sects. Like there's scientific study, like this, there's some like cultish type stuff in there. There's all these different things that people do in response to it while they're in the city that gets built underneath it and everything. And I do think that's interesting. Is part of that kind of you looking at those varying sides that you could react to magic or the unexplainable or phenomenon. Is that a big part of the book for you?
Oh, totally. You're like as good at tearing up my brain as my therapist is. You're getting it all right. Yeah, I mean, basically it's this whole thing about like, I don't know. I went through a lot at the beginning of this year personally with contending with the fear of the unknown, contending with uncertainty, and having to get over that hump where you get in a bad place because you tell yourself if nothing really matters, then what's the point? Why am I doing anything at all? And I had to go through a lot to learn that uncertainty is actually kind of magical, and uncertainty is kind of this like beautiful freeing revelation that like frees up your responsibility from so many of the things that make you feel bad because you can't control them anyway. You're just worrying about them because it feels responsible to worry, right? But there's something about accepting uncertainty and like that is really interesting. And I think that the different sects of phenomenosity in the city are people who, some people who feel like the unknown is something to be picked apart until it can be controlled. And there are people that believe the unknown is simply a feeling to be harnessed. And there are those that believe that the unknown is not unknown. It's a symbol from God.
Right.
But, what it is undeniable and unresponsive.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that was like the 2 big aspects I wanted the phenomenon to be. And the beautiful design of the phenomenon came from Phil. That beautiful page where you can see it the first time, he literally took my breath away because I had talked about what I wanted the phenomenon to be. I had showed him videos of like atmospheric phenomena I'd seen. I told him things I didn't want it to be. And then when he showed it to me, it took my breath away. I was like, that's what it needs to be. It is unresponsive and undeniable. It just has to be both, and it has to change people in that way.
It might be the single coolest thing he's ever drawn. It's really amazing.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It is breathtaking. Like I adore that image. That page just gives me chills.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of details to it, like how the colors are coming off the mountain that are just amazing. But it's interesting, like talking to you about this. It reminds me, one of my favorite movies is I love Arrival, the Denis Villeneuve.
Me too.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of Arrival in the sense that it's like one of the things that I think is amazing about Arrival is like fundamentally like the ships that are in that. Like everyone is so dead set on trying to find meaning for why they're at where they're at. Like I think like the ultimate thing that they come up with is like the closest connection is like every location had a Sheena Easton song as like a #1 hit at the same time or something like that, which is insane. But at the same time, I mean, that's kind of how we approach phenomena, right? Is we try to attribute meaning to something that otherwise seems meaningless. And that's why like Louise in that movie is incredible, because it's like fundamentally it's a story about the power of communication. And I think that's why it's going to be really interesting to follow Amelia in this story, is because Amelia is trying to find her own story that is unrelated to the phenomenon itself. And I don't know, I mean, like I love the reason why I think it's really interesting to have this is like the phenomenon itself could have meaning, or it could just be a thing that gathers these people and drives the story, you know? I mean, of course, you're writing the story. Who am I talking to?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the thing is like I've spent a lot of time because everything like thinking about what it is and what people think it could be and all that because it's like I don't know like something that's I remember at a really young age someone told me that it was like well like what if someone like told me the thought experiment or I was in like a GT class or something where it was like what would a sense look like what would a sixth sense look like and everyone's like oh you mean like reading minds and it's like no like a way to detect something that you don't already have try to think of that and it's like would I have a new organ like what is that you know and it's like but the idea that there are things out there giving single signals that we cannot read or understand
Right.
has always been really important to me and then I read the Pulitzer Prize winning novel The Overstory this year, which is a lot about that as well. Which inspired me a lot because about massive scale and human connection and signals that we should be getting and aren't, or maybe just shouldn't be getting. Maybe they aren't for us.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of I am captivated and mystery and question and skepticism and all that has been the most interesting thing in my whole life for me, and it's still the thing. A good question is always what gets me into anything. I'll stay up all night watching a crazy documentary. I love finding weird truths. So I was really excited to make a world where I could just bury those all over and hang them up in lights and just watch people live.
It makes a lot of sense that your lead is an investigator of a sort.
Yeah, and we wanted to make it unique because that's so many stories, right? We wanted to make her a unique kind of investigator and someone who is a protagonist that I would have fun and relate to. There are a lot of little Easter eggs about Amelia, things that we've seen and things that we'll see later that are me drawing from my own experience just because it's my creator own book and she's her own character, but there's just so much I can put into her freely because there's no one to tell me no. And
yeah, that's the beauty of it.
I mean, there's Phil. Phil can tell me no. He's the only person I listen to.
Can I give you? I got to give you props on one other thing. You have a rare gift at coming up with really great names for your creator-owned stuff. Like Phenomenocity, I love it. I also want to say kudos to you for including a pronunciation guide. I nailed it. I just want to say that I was right from the start. So I was very proud of my pronunciation. But you have Phenomenocity, Euthonauts, Assassinistas, which is just an A+ name. I love the name of that.
Thank you.
Good job because that's like a hook. But related to that,
I'm like the anti Matt Rose.
Yeah,
he has like long titles made of short normal words, and I'm like, no, I just want one big one that I made up. But it's kind of a thing at this point. I'm kind of fond of it. So thank you for noticing.
We need to come up with like a Matt Rosenberg title generator where it turns any comic title into like 5 words.
Yeah, like Phenomenocity would be like, who died and what is in the city? Like,
ooh, that's like a pretty good name too.
The title of the book.
You need to become like a tiling consultant. You got a skill set right here. But anyways, well, I do want to bring up one thing involving the first issue because the one thing that's interesting about the first issue is it's what is it, 11 pages?
It's supposed to be 10, but Phil and I changed our minds.
Okay, there we go. Well, I do think that it's you don't have anyone controlling you here. You can do whatever you want. So instead of doing like a 20-page issue or a 24-page issue or 30-page issue, fitting into the archetypes of comic books that have been established over 80 years or whatever, you did 10 pages. And I think that's really great because it explains everything you need to know about 2 things: the city at the core of the book and Amelia Hurt, the main character. It introduces them and leaves everything else to the mystery. It's like a perfect hook. Did you design it more as like a traditional first issue? I'm doing air quotes for listeners that can't see that, which is all of you. Or is it more like designed as like a hook for future readers?
It's a first chapter. Like it was designed as our first chapter of the story. But the more comics I write, the more I learn the value of how to pace and set up an introduction. So like kind of every first issue I write has to be like a setup, but also things have to happen. So it's like,
right.
And we had a lot of building to do in these first pages. And I was just like, the real effort was like, there was a lot of stuff I wrote and rewrote because I had to write out the exposition-y version first and then be like, this sucks. And then fix it to make the version where it's like, it feels a little more natural, like, Like there was an early version of the scene with Amelia where like most of what she's saying or most of what the conversation she has with her mother is in captions. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, and it was just because it was the first draft. I was just telling myself the story. I was just telling myself what Amelia was thinking about in that moment because it was a first draft. And everyone should do that. Everyone should write first drafts you hate. That's how you get to the good ones. So, when I went back to my second draft, it was like, dummy, make her talk to someone. Like, and then it's like, oh, Phil and I had talked up, and Phil had drawn this great design for her mother, and I had talked about how I wanted her mother's place designed a certain way, and so I was like, well, of course her mother's there, and we get to meet her, and then her mother is obviously someone who knows Amelia, so when the way she talks to Amelia tells us about Amelia, so it's like first issues and first openings like that can be and can feel very designed, and it's because they have to be a
Of
little
course,
bit.
yeah.
Yeah.
I also like how the mom is going on vacation immediately. So it's like you use her for what you need, then she's off to the Sydney property.
Yeah, and that's, very much like it's how her and Amelia are different, right? Like she's just, Amelia's a little bit withdrawn and weird, and even though she's, 30, her mom treats her like she's still a kid because because they're just very different people, and so like they don't track growth and maturity the same way.
Right.
Yeah, no, I it was definitely a challenging 11 pages, but yeah, we were like, let's do 10 pages, and then I wrote it and I sent it to Phil and I said, I think this is 11, and he was like, it is. And just drew it as 11. We're not even beholden to print, we're not even if we were at Image, if we wanted to add an extra page, we'd have to like take out an ad or move things around, and it's like we don't even have to worry about that. We can literally just say, hey, Phil, draw another page and we'll make sure you get paid for it. Like.
And now, a quick word from one of off-panel's sponsors. That sponsor's Bad Idea. Bad Idea paid for the sponsorship, but they won't give me anything to promote since they're over. So here I am, saying the name Bad Idea. Contractually. I have to. That's it. Bad Idea. They're a thing, I guess. And now, back to the show. I got to give you credit. You, in regards to the reader-funded aspect of this, which is, I think, a really important distinction for your Substack versus other ones. I did like the line in your write-up where you said, this one's like a snake. She'll get as big as you'll feed her. More subscribers means more pages, exciting new team members like a colorist for us, and more time Phil and I can dedicate to this story. That's, like, it's a perfect value hook. It's also perfect imagery. Although, is that true? Do snakes really get bigger the more they eat? I don't know this. Is that true?
Apparently I don't know how true it is. I mean,
I believe it.
But like snakes in captivity, basically, like if you keep them in like a little tank, I mean, they'll be unhappy. You shouldn't keep a snake in a little tank, but they won't get very big and they won't eat as much because they don't want to get big. Like I think snakes are pretty aware of the space they take up. But I think like if you have a larger tank, then your snake will keep getting hungry, so you feed it more and it gets bigger.
Okay.
It's something I've heard about.
I also get bigger the more I eat.
Yeah, like a snake. I too become larger when I eat more burgers. But yeah, I mean, really, that's just the best way for us to, explain what we want to do here. I mean, and it's all true, like pages are black and white with spot color because it's a two-person team, and Phil also does our lettering, and we would need another colorist, or we would need another person to do that. We would need a colorist to do that, because Phil and I both also, have other work. But if Phenomenocity is fed to the point that we are not as concerned with other things we're doing, then we have more time. I can pay Phil for more pages. Time is money, and if we have more money, we can spend more of it on the book. That's the gauche version of it. Yeah, I mean, the snake metaphor is true. But it's good too because it also means that, if Phil and I get busy with other things, we can make time for a few pages a month usually.
Right.
I can send Phil, 3 or 4 pages at a time, or we can get ahead on designs or whatever. Like, and it's so funny too because it feels so different. Like last week when we were really preparing for the launch and we were still getting things together, it's like I would work on this stuff at the end of the day after my other work felt like a reward because it's just so mine.
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels so rewarding. I forgot how, and I've never been this close and to a comic I'm making before, in the sense where it's like we make it, it gets made, we put it out in people's hands. I'm talking directly to the people buying it. There's no publisher middleman. I've never had this kind of experience before, and it's so rewarding. I might be addicted.
I read that you're cooking up some special writing projects on your own, which include from fashion and costuming essays to the Mad Men Wrestling Foundation, which sounds amazing. I don't even know what that means, but I love it.
Yeah, the Mad Men, I should say Federation. The Mad Men Wrestling Federation is something that my husband Blake, who co-writes with me from time to time, he's an incredible writer. and very funny. And one night we devised something. There is footage called the Mad Men Wrestling Federation, and we showed some friends, and they were like, "You have to put this online somewhere." So at some point, Blake and I will actualize the Mad Men Wrestling Federation for you all. I promise.
Does this involve John Hamm powerbombing someone?
In a sense, after a fashion.
I do feel like he'd be a very good wrestler. I don't know why. He just seems like he's got the right mindset for that.
You come out with like some Don Draper energy and play a good heel.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I've talked to a number of creators who are on Substack, and the creation of supporting content. Like, I just had Mike Huddleston and Mike Del Mundo on, and we talked about how much, like, the biggest learning curve for them was almost learning or like explaining their process in a written way that they've never had to do before. And like that's something that they're having to do on the regular basis. And like for them, it's like almost as difficult, maybe even more difficult for them than creating comics or creating designs, because that's something that they do every day. I love all of your ideas for it so far, but what is your approach to creating the supporting materials? Is it just writing what feels right, or are you going in with a plan as well?
Phil and I have like a shared calendar where we plan out what we want to post and when, just so that we're both aware of what's going on every day. And for example, on Wednesday, I took time to post my George Perez story, and I didn't do any fundraising on that essay because I didn't feel right. I just wanted to share that story with people. It wasn't for paid subscribers. It was just a way for people to read that story with him. And I didn't do any, banging the gong and asking for money. And, I let Phil know that on that day. So I'm like, hey, this is what I'm doing today. So like, if you were like, hey, let's do an art post and get a bunch of money up, I'd be like, so we have a calendar so we know who's doing what and when. We have it kind of broken out. We try to like Phil has his time lapses he's done, and we try to pick a day of the week that those go out. And then we're going to be doing, like, we have some other content that we're going to be doing about the different factions, and then we're going to be starting our conversations with our founders. So yeah, a lot of our approach is just, thinking what we would want to see. And we also Phil made a lot of great stuff while he kept and like deliberately kept a lot of stuff while he was designing everything, because we knew we were going to have this to do. So he like took a ton of videos while he was drawing, and that's great because people love seeing that. And he does his like commentary and things. And Phil's a great teacher too. And I definitely lean on that a lot with him, is that he's someone that has taught art classes.
Comics experience, right?
Yeah. He's taught a lot of art classes. He's just really patient and really thoughtful when it comes to that kind of thing. So I think for content, we just lean on what we like doing. I just like getting on and opening up my blog post and rapping with people, or recording a conversation and throwing it up. And Phil really loves just, sharing his process with people. But we definitely have it. Like, we have some really exciting additional content planned out that I think people are going to be really excited about. That's like the kind of stuff that I really like as like, a nerd who, whenever I hear the word factions, I'm like, which one would I be?
Oh my God, I hadn't thought of that. That's actually a really good thing. People love aligning themselves with specific things.
I know, I do too. So I'm gonna give everyone their juice for that, because again, I'm just doing stuff that would work on me.
Yeah.
Because I always really believe in just creating work for the kind of people. Like, if you create work for people, if you're honest about the work you create, then you should naturally attract people who are honest about and enjoy the same things.
Sure.
And so that's kind of my dream, right? If I just make the most honest content that makes me happy possible, then the people who will also be made happy by that will be people like me. And so I'll feel comfortable around them. And the people that don't like my stuff can get bent and go read something else. There's plenty of stuff I don't like, and I just keep my mouth shut about it. So...
I love it. I love it. I will say pretty much everything you said so far also aligns with what I like. So it's working on me. You're doing a very good job. I gotta say, Phil's too powerful. Seriously, that he's good at all the process stuff. He's good at thinking ahead on that stuff. He has great hair. He actually can pull off a fanny pack. How the hell is this guy? Like, this person's not real.
Yeah, no, he's like, and that's just like the top of it. He's unfairly real. I'm really, really grateful that he's doing this with me. And like, he really, really does the work of, like, when there are times where I'm overwhelmed because I have a really busy schedule and I need, my ass kicked. Like, I'm really appreciative that Phil is someone who's like, I need this and when, and I love you and take care of yourself, but this is the schedule.
Well, that's the trust, right? You have to trust a partner is going to be real with you, and you need them to be real with you.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's the same back, like Phil and I are very like loving, cool people. So he never I feel like when if I'm giving notes on something, it's just like, oh yeah, just change this. And when if I write something, he gives me notes on it back. We kind of run everything by each other. It's nice.
I'm not saying that I don't want a colorist. It's like I love Jeff Smith's Bone. Like, that is one of my all-time favorite comics. I love the black and white version. And I remember one time I actually looked at the color. I was like, oh, this looks really good. I'm like, I always said I like the black and white version. I got to stick to it. But I will say Phil's spot colors do look really good. Like it has a lot more presence than just spot colors. It's like almost doesn't even explain like what he does on it, because he uses the washes really well to like give a lot of depth to it.
He does. And it's not just like, yeah, it's not just like spot flat colors. It's like spot atmosphere.
Yeah.
Like one of the rules is that the phenomenon is always in color.
Oh, yeah.
Because, well, one, how would it even look in lines? Like it's like a painted design,
Yeah.
basically. So it's like Phil doing lines of it wouldn't make sense. So the phenomenon, when it's visible, is always in color. And I think that's like super cool. That was something Phil and I talked about and kind of came to this together. But one thing I was really, we kind of both had the same idea, like, let's do it like this. And I actually just watched Belfast, the Kenneth Branagh film that was nominated for an Oscar this year. And I thought it was beautiful. And one thing it does really well is that it's a black and white film, takes place in the 60s, I believe, in Northern Ireland. And the only things that are in color are like TVs aren't in color because TV was black and white at that time in that part of the world. But when they go to see a film, the film is in color. And when they go to see a play, the play is in color. And there are a couple moments in the film where it's not really ever explained, and it's not in like a Wizard of Oz way. It's just like things that are kind of being like observed as entertainment are in color. And I really liked the idea of like, what if something's in color, but we're saying something about it? And there are a couple places in a visual medium where we use it for visibility, right? For example, the captions that are Amelia's are highlighted with a stroke that is the same color as her hair in the preview art, more or less. It's like just subtle things like that. But the big one that I love so much is that Phil always paints in the phenomenon, so that even it always looms as like a mysterious, beautiful, strange, larger than life thing over the city, and it's never lost in the wonder of the city that there is this impossibly unreal thing just hanging above it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I have to admit, I naturally thought of the movie Pleasantville, but I'm guessing Belfast used it in a much different way. It sounds like it was.
Yeah, absolutely. There was no color moment in Belfast like the very famous one in Pleasantville.
Oh my God, Pleasantville! What a fascinating movie. Well, I did want to talk about, just to close, I just had some larger thought things. And I do think it's really interesting, like looking at your career and kind of everything you've done so far, because you've taken on a lot of different types of projects really fast. You've done, a WWE book, Rick and Morty, Power Rangers, like you've done big two work for like, Excalibur and Catwoman, and your own properties like Euthanauts and Assassinistas. And that's a lot of different things for a lot of different publishers, pretty quickly. Because I mean, it seems like you really kind of started, like you really started in haste, like with the 2014 Top Cow talent hunt win and everything like that. With all that, and also like getting involved with like the X Office and kind of getting it, because like the X Office is really fascinating. Like talking to anybody who worked in the X Office, it's like that's kind of like a different flavor of comic making than most are used to for like the big two, just because
Totally.
It's collaborative. You do things in a lot of different ways, and it's really interesting. But how do you feel like the past few years have really helped you find what you want out of your career, and like, how has it led you to this?
I mean, honestly, this is gonna sound really sappy, but like, I'll friends, like, some of them are my, mentors and coworkers in the X Office, and some of them are other writers at the Big Two. But these people are just like my friends and mentors, and what has empowered me is seeing the steps that they've made, and then being grateful to be to able to ask them, like, hey, I want to do this. How can I? And what are some good steps? Because really in comics, it's like one of those things where it's like no one can do it for you. Like, to be really successful, you have to really go out on your own and take some scary risks that sometimes involve like standing up for yourself when it's scary to stand up for yourself, or choosing to prioritize your own project rather than taking on another, like leaving space in your schedule to work on your own stuff that you don't know how well, if any, you'll get paid for, instead of taking on reliable paying work. All those things are terrifying, and I totally didn't think I was the kind of person who could do them. And I'm so happy right now that I'm doing it. And it's totally because of just like my friends and mentors. It's the biggest thing that over the past 3 years is that I've been able to have just an incredible network of people in this industry, and have people like my wonderful husband who is in the industry now with me, and we co-write, all these people who are just able to help me and give me advice and grace. Like, I know it just sounds so humble, but it's just the truth. The biggest thing that's changed in the past 3 years is maybe I got smart enough to listen to help, and I got brave enough to ask for it, and gracious enough to do the work when the advice is given to me.
Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense. I mean, that's one of the things, and not to like say that, I'm not trying to say it's only the X Office experience, but that's one of the things I think is really cool about the X Office experience from the people I've talked to is it does a lot of times, there's like this tension at the core of anything like comic making because it's at the intersection of art and commerce. It's like there's you having success means I don't have success, some might think. But that's one of the things I think is really cool about the X Office is it seems like everyone really roots for each other, whether it's like you want Ben Percy to succeed as he's writing like Wolverine or something like that. And maybe Ben Percy wants you to succeed when you're doing Phenomenocity because it's like you're still a teammate even when you're playing for another team when that team is yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And, we're all aware, like, let's not, be coy about it. We're all aware that there are a lot of stories in comics of people who gave a lot of their lives and creativity to companies where they didn't own the product and then and later in life really regretted that because those companies did not take care of them for their contributions in the way that I think maybe they should have. So it's an act of like love really in this industry for people to give you the advice and the help that you need to make this stuff happen. And it's like such an act of love, I think. And I just try to pay it forward to the people I know. I've been, after this really awesome launch week, I've been talking to a lot of people about different ways. People have been saying, oh, I've been sitting on this creator-owned idea and I think I'm actually going to do it because it seems like you're having a good luck. And I'm like, please, that's what inspired me. Ask me your question. I just, I want everyone to feel empowered to make the art that they want to make.
Yeah. The last thing I want to bring up, I did think there was an important distinction in your write-up about the project, about Phenomenocity, especially in regards to Phil. You described Phenomenocity as like the lead project for your Substack, which, that implies more. And I do think that's one of the cool things about this is like, if this goes well, it's the type of thing that you can build on, but it's also the type of thing other people can build on. Not saying they're going to build off Phenomenocity, but it's like if you could be like the success story that people see that can build into other things. And the beauty of it too is like you own all of this. You're just posting it on Substack. Later it can be a print project. It's just like any other webcomic. It could become like an image book. It could become a second book. Anything. It can be anything now. And that's great.
Yeah, I mean I got, contracted to develop the magic system for Three Worlds, Three Moons. That was awesome. I would love to be at a level where I could, reach out to other writers and be creating work so that people could tell stories. I mean, yeah, that's like a dream, is being able to have a platform where I'm, able to do for people what was done for me. That would be ideal.
Yeah,
because I'm very grateful.
I do want to say a real last thing: the fact that you were recruited as like the magic person, the magic systems developer for Three Worlds, Three Moons. I mean, Jonathan clearly believed that you're the magic person, so like that was that's a good call. I remember seeing that and I was like, oh man, that is so cool that you, Ram, and Al were like, you are the ones who will develop this very specific thing. And it's I don't know, it's rad.
It was really cool. It was really fun to be asked, and like seeing what we were each asked to do was like funny because it was like, it made a lot of sense. It's like, okay, you very clearly
got us pegged.
Yeah, but it was great because we were really just, I mean, and this is what it's like every time I work with John on something, a lot of Ten of Swords, we made like this too, whereas like, it's like this specific, this specific, this specific, go nuts, come back with whatever you've got and we'll do notes. And like, I always come back with like double what's asked for because I can't shut up. And then I'm like, always like really pleased and surprised by how much he likes what I do because I'm such a huge fan of his work. And now that we get to work together again and again, it's fun. It's super fun. Yeah, and that's like, again, seeing very successful people believe in you and say, hey, I think you're good and I want to work with you is always really validating. It's so crazy to me that like, I'm writing Catwoman and Chip Zdarsky's writing Batman, and this is a guy who like I used to stand in line to have sign my Sex Criminals copies. Like, and now this is like a peer and we like are planning stories together. It's just very, very wild, but I'm very, very grateful. And it's like nothing makes me believe in myself more than when people I respect believe in me back.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I wish you the best of luck in everything coming forward. Phenomenocity is fantastic. Everyone should check it out.
Thank you, David.
But Tini, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on and talk about Phenomenocity, Arrival, all kinds of other random things. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. I appreciate you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. Thanks for all the kind words about the book. I'm so glad you're really enjoying it. I love a good mystery, so I hope you guys will too.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with writer Tini Howard. You can find her new series Phenomenocity on her Substack at tinihoward.substack.com. Also, big thanks to Deanna Chapman for stepping in to edit this podcast. Deanna is the best. Love Off Panel and want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel, and when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site Sketched at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content and its members-only forum. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking it on Facebook at /Sketched. That's SKTCHD. Follow on Twitter and Instagram at @SketchComic or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Ben Damstead, Cameron Brown, Rom V, Devin Fitzsimons, Nick Walker, Patrick Hoyle, Isaac Warren, Scott Carpenter, Rent Narb Studios Comics, Capes and Tights Podcast, Klaus Van de Ven, Brian, Submet Industries, Raj Patel, Jack Mulqueen, Kyle, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Elliot Metz, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Scott Buwan, Canadian by Proxy, Johnny Cannon, Bradley Rader, Carl Troy, Brandon DePillis, Patrick Brower, Declan Shalvey, Dan Guarino, Josh Williamson, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, SB, Nick Bennett, Daniel Whitfield, Susanna Polo, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Charlie Chu, Stephen Hall, Pensacola Pop Comics, Kim Eslin, Philip Myra, Christian Shelton, Kenny Porter, Chris Pacello, Torin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Carl Mizell, Paul Slates, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwan, Vita Ayala, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, WMQ Comics, Akil Kokachi, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Plato, Brendan Fletcher, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Nassy, Adam Bogart, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendrick, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxwell, Cliff Chang, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Mark Abbott, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comic Star in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.